and a lot of work now with equity. So I'm happy to be part of the team.
Yes, and we have people from all over the Commonwealth on this call, from all different facets of education, public education, private education, higher education. Very excited. So Nikole, I'm going to hand it over to you, talking about how do we navigate some of those courageous conversations right now when we're maybe just feeling a little uncomfortable having those conversations.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, just thank you to Rebecca and Jim, the IU17 team, for just having this idea. I don't know if I've shared with the both of you, but I've been promoting this type of approach to other intermediate units because I think it's a really smart way to go and to give people a small chunk of time at the end of the day to just kind of get some quick learning. So thank you both for this idea. My name is Dr. Nikole Hollin-Sims. I'm an educational consultant for the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, Patton or Patan, whatever you like to say, in what part of the state that you're in. I'm also on special assignment supporting the Department of Education around equity. And so just really excited to have this opportunity to be with all of you today. And so as Rebecca mentioned, the purpose of today's session is to really focus on courageous conversations in the classroom. It was not even a week ago where we were probably sitting where we are now and getting the news of what was happening at our nation's capital. That next morning, I remember waking up really early, 5 o'clock, couldn't sleep. At that point, I said, I feel like it's my responsibility to get resources to educators to be ready for when the students walk through the door, figuratively, if you're virtual. And so I needed to think about not only the students, but also us as adults and what we were processing also at this time. So really quickly, what I want to do before I jump in, and as Rebecca has said, this is informal. So we're going to have questions. I'm going to do my best to answer and give you my recommendations, but I want to check in with you first. So if you don't mind, what I'm going to do is share my screen. And if you would do a quick Mentimeter for me, that would be awesome. Let me get it up here for you. So if you would go to www.menti.com, menti.com, and use the code 9678086, one word to describe what you are bringing into the space today. We won't take a ton of time because I know we only have a half an hour together, but I did just want to take some moments just to see how we're doing. Hope empowered community. About 30 of us. So I'll go for 10 just for the sake of time, but you can continue to populate this throughout our time together. Excited, listening. Unsettled, I'm with you. Let me see if I'm reading this right. My screen's in the way. Refueled, I love it. Concern, empathy. If you've not done a Mentimeter before, what typically happens is if people have a similar response, that word becomes the largest out of the others. And so right now we have a variety of responses so far. Seeking. Okay, so for sake of time, I'm going to stop. I just really wanted to get a sense of where we are, how people are coming into the space. Concerned is becoming more and more large, so that lets me know where we're at. And thank you for that vulnerability and sharing. And so what I think would be important to do is just really get a sense of what it is that you're worried about as it relates to having conversations in the classroom. One of the things that I do want to share in the chat is a Padlet that I created that has resources that are dedicated to this effort that hopefully you can have at your use whenever you need it. So I'm going to open the floor if there are questions and just want to start this off for us.
Feel free to type in the chat or even just unmute yourself again. It's very informal. I will, Nikole, just that Padlet eventually when you get a chance, if you can, it's private. So if you can change the sharing permissions, but it's okay. I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will definitely fix that. But in the meantime, I don't want to belabor.
Yeah, no. Any questions?
And you may all feel kind of uncertain as to what to ask, and that's okay. One of the resources that I did put in the Padlet was from Teaching Tolerance. And so the Teaching Tolerance article talks about when bad things happen. And essentially, it talks about how we as adults, our students are exposed to the news cycle. So how do you have conversations in classrooms about what might be happening, especially in the moment? But we're kind of outside of the moment. And I hate to say it, we may be in some other moments to come. So how do we think about that? What are some steps? And so that article provides you with 4 steps to consider. And I love when Teaching Tolerance does that because it makes it very simple for people to kind of keep in their mind on the steps they can think about just as reminders. So the first one, and I just need to go to my notes and make sure I got it. The first one is listen. And so with that, it sounds very, yeah, of course you do that. The issue with that one is sometimes we're uncomfortable or we're worried about what we're going to say or how the conversation may go, so we try to avoid it. If a student brings it up, listen. Listen to what it is that they want to talk about. Listen to the other responses from the other students and be willing to create the space of an open space. Number 2 is to protect. And so this really speaks to protecting students from misinformation. We know that there are a lot of different media outlets out there, social media, our news cycles, etc. We want to be sure as the adults that consume this on a regular basis, how to help our students know what is clear information, neutral information, if you will, if that even exists anymore, and also how we can filter out what things might be totally misleading. Number 3 is to model. And so in modeling, you are being vulnerable yourself. You may not want to share your exact opinion. That's totally your level of comfort and in the space that you're in, but modeling that it's okay to have certain emotions, certain feelings, etc. And then number 4 is to take care of yourself. And I think that's very self-explanatory. And that's why I did the check-in in the beginning, because for many of us, we're coming down off of what happened a week ago, but there's still so much going on. I can share that I live in Harrisburg, so we're in the state capital. So there's definitely a worry and anxiety about what the coming week or weeks may bring. So those 4 steps: listen, protect, model, and take care of yourselves. I see a question.
Nikole, I have a question. Dr. Hollins, I have a question. I just finished a meeting with my district-wide equity team, well, at one of my school-based teams. And it was very interesting. We've done a lot of work on courageous conversations and providing those brave spaces for students to talk. And some of the teams shared today some of the concerns that teachers had, that they feel more comfortable, and I guess they feel a sense of control of having those conversations when they're in the classroom. But their concern was having those conversations in the virtual environment and having parents listening, and how parents may take the information and misconstrue it, send it to their principals or superintendents, or, and so there was a level of anxiety today that I had not seen with my team before, because we have been having conversations about having these courageous conversations for years. Right. But today there was a little bit of reserve, because they are concerned that in a virtual environment, you don't know who's listening. In your classroom, again, like I said, there is a level of control, and you provide those opportunities for the students, but and in my district, we've had some parents be concerned about conversations that occurred in the classroom. And even though the teachers weren't necessarily given their opinion, they felt that teachers shouldn't even provide the opportunity for children to speak which is something I'm completely against, because we can talk about if you lost your tooth, you can't find your, but that's what we do. We have morning meeting in our elementary school, and we do all these things in our secondary schools. So I just found it very interesting today and a little unsettling. And I reminded them that this is what we do. But there was some concern, and I don't know if anyone else has heard anyone else share this. I wanted to bring this out because it was a concern today in my team meeting.
No, I really appreciate that, Shawana. I think that is so critical, especially in this new space we're in that we're not accustomed to. So I appreciate you bringing that to light. I think I saw some other folks that wanted to chime in. Susan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I did talk about it, offered the space for my students to talk about it. And I have a person very close to me that also teaches in our district who offered that same space, and a parent who emailed him and the principal about the inappropriateness of the conversation. They were white, the parent who was disapproving of the conversation, but the principal backed up the teacher. But I'm always of the opinion that we shouldn't ever say anything that we wouldn't say in front of parents in our classrooms anyway. So have the courageous conversation. But I am always thinking, oh my gosh, my voice is being broadcast to many places that I might not be thinking of all of the time. But still being ready to have that conversation. But I have heard that from some folks, some hesitation about what they're saying. But I don't believe that it has stopped me from having the courageous conversations with my students. May I offer something else that I heard a teacher say that gave me pause? So I believe as the adults, we should set up the safe spaces for the conversations. But one thing that a teacher said to me when I was having this conversation with them yesterday, the other teacher is also white that I was speaking to. And she said that maybe some teachers aren't comfortable because they haven't processed the information yet themselves. And I guess trying to meet people where they are and having some grace for that. But we are the adults in the room. And I feel like even if we aren't ready, we need to get ourselves ready for the children, and wondering how to really answer that in a way that meets that person where they are, but, also pushes them to be ready for the children in the space as the adult in the room.
Yeah, no, I'm thankful that you shared that, because that I think is coming up more often than not. I think there are a lot of people talk about 9/11, feeling like after 9/11, I didn't know what to do. I don't really know how to talk through this or explain it. And so I hear that. I think some of the things that I would offer, one of the books that I've started reading even before this happened, but based on the summer, is the book called Not Light, But Fire by Matthew Kay. And it primarily focuses on how to lead meaningful race conversations in the classroom. But I would argue that even though it has a race focus, it speaks to this open dialogue. How do you set up the space? How do you become more comfortable when, let's say, it goes to the left or the conversation detours? And so that book has been really helpful. One of the things that he offered, that to Susan's point, that I think might be helpful, is to almost find that partner teacher that you might be able to practice with, or that person that you can role play it with. Or if you haven't processed it yet, that person you can say, hey, I'm not really clean on this. Can you give me some talking points? Can you tell me what you did? It's that being willing to accept some of that additional support. And I really liked how he framed it. He said something to the effect of, sometimes in our schools, and I know I'm preaching to the choir now, sometimes in our schools, we have a hesitancy or an anxiety because even in our teacher lounges or in our main offices, we don't feel comfortable saying what we need to say. And so sometimes, and not even sometimes, that ultimately translates into your level of comfort in the classroom too, because that environment permeates. And so he talks through that. And I think that's really important. And that's where he offered that idea of having that teacher partner that you can rely on to be a little bit more vulnerable with and get some help and some coaching around how maybe Susan did it or how Shawana did it and get some strategies there. So that's one thing that really resonated with what you said, Susan.
Yeah, Nikole, we have 2 hands raised.
Sure.
So we have Keith and then Dr. Allen. So Keith Veldus.
Yeah, so I'm a middle school principal, and I appreciate this because I guess last Thursday morning, I was in up early and trying to wrestle, how as a building administrator do we lead and encourage our teachers to create those open spaces?
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the things you just shared kind of answer my question, but that would be the question I guess I would put out for resources or for other building administrators. How do we, almost the PD, how do we encourage our teachers to be comfortable enough or willing to have those conversations in such a dynamic time? And I'll just share as a positive. I was welcomed into a classroom yesterday and having those conversations, and it was really refreshing. And the one thing that I would like to share is, and I want to share with our staff, is students often surprise us.
Yeah.
I'm in a middle, central Pennsylvania rural community that had we had some race issues last year, and so there are some hesitancies to bring up hard conversations. And so even in that culture, our students surprised us and how they responded, and it was really encouraging. So I'm hoping to take that to our staff to encourage more conversations, but that's my question for leaders is how do we engage? How do we help our teachers get to that comfort level?
I think you're right on the money, Keith. So I can share one of my colleagues who's an administrator in an elementary school. Now, her district is a little bit more diverse than what you described yours as being. However, she took, and I don't mean to keep hyping up the Not Light But Fire, but she took that as her PD. That became a book study for her staff members, and they had the opportunities in PLCs to really talk through it. And it actually was on time for her because she started it at the beginning of the year. And then by the time we got here, they had a little bit more comfortability. Now, what I will share that she shared with me was that one of her brand new spanking new teachers first year really was excited to have the conversations with her youngsters. However, she needed a coach. And that's what I keep going back to is people get very excited about this work and they really want to do the right thing. And unfortunately, there were students that went back and told their parents, we had to talk about this and I was made guilty for being white. So that was then translated to her as the administrator that then had to deal with that as an outcome. So I share all of that to say that's one way to approach it. The other one, and I'm so mad that my Padlet is private, but the other resource is from Facing History in Ourselves. And that was a resource that I shared, and I can share with Rebecca. She may actually have the email that I sent out the day of or day after. And that particular one was in direct response to the insurrection on January 6th. And that spoke to Shawana's point, when you have a virtual space, what are the things that you can do? Can you have them do a graffiti board? Can you have them journal off to the side and then come back and have some open dialogue, or even go into breakout rooms? Again, based on levels of comfort on your students. And like you said, Keith, they can sometimes surprise you. So having that trust with some of them to engage in that conversation. But those are just some ideas that as you think of PD, you could even build an entire PD off of that one resource. Facing History in Ourselves is really, really good and timely.
Yeah, and I this morning, if any of you were on the Drumline presentation, he kept bringing it up, like book studies are great and that's a start, but if we're going to commit to it, you have to go all in. And so it's even that conversation of it's not just that superficial layer. So how do we do that as a team, as a Commonwealth? It's, this calls from all of you all over the state. So that's really important. I believe Dr. Allen had a question, but she may have just gotten kicked off. Is there any other questions? Any other questions out there?
I didn't get kicked off. I'm just
Oh, you
lower.
did. There you are, Dr. Allen. Go ahead.
It really wasn't a question, but it was an offering of a resource that actually just came out today that speaks to, the title is Western Pennsylvania Teachers Grapple with the current events at the Capitol riot. However, we know as educators that that applies to all of us, nationwide as well as across the state. But one of the teachers who was interviewed happens to be my son's teacher and was a part of the conversation that day. And he offered his strategy that guided the conversation. And he opened it up with to the students, I think, I know, and I wonder. So they were able to start the conversation themselves using those 3 stems. And it's very powerful. And it actually chokes me up because he said, I cried with them that day.
Wow.
And I think it was so powerful, and my son, just to keep it local and immediate, said to me, you can tell he cares about the kids. So through that grappling of a very difficult conversation, he created an environment in that one instant that resonated with those students in that day. So I shared that article in the chat if you're interested. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. I think that was so important to hear. And I think what people like, and I'm getting this sense just from the work we've been doing, Eva, they need tools. So any way that we can provide something that gives them some of those sentence starters, I love that idea. That's really, really critical because we don't always have the right words. So this allows them to at least have a starter and then express exactly where they're at. So definitely. Another thing that I would want to highlight, and please, if there are other questions as we kind of round out the time, please don't hesitate. But again, teaching tolerance does a lot. And one of the things that I've shared in previous trainings is, let's say you're in a conversation and a student makes a very derogatory statement, or inadvertently an adult that might be listening to Shawana's point makes a very derogatory statement. What do? And so the piece that they have created is how to interrupt that. It's speaking up to bias. And bias can be explicit or implicit. So explicit, very outward, very in your face. You kind of are pushed to the side like, wow, I can't believe you just said that. We had that happen this morning with our national expert. Someone wrote him a very nasty gram during his presentation. So it's happening. And so I think in ways we need to be prepared for that. And in our preparation, know some steps and tools. So that goes to the tool component. So the 4 steps for that, I love, again, teaching tolerance does 4 steps. So the 4 steps for that, number 1 is to interrupt. So when that comment comes, interrupt. Hey, wait a minute. It can be that easy. Number 2 is to question. Help me understand what you mean by that. Could you repeat what you said, and did you mean it that way? Question. Number 3 is to educate. So in the education space, it could be something as simple as, when I worked with Jim, I didn't have that experience. It could be that simple. And then number 4 is echo. And so if you're with a group of folks, and ideally, if you have that teacher partner that you rely upon, in church world, we say accountability partner, that accountability partner that you can rely on, if they're with you, they echo what you've educated that person on. And so with that echoing, it creates a space where the person isn't necessarily put on defense, but is probed to maybe unpack more of what it is that they mean. And a lot of times when you get to the root, they go, oh my gosh, that was really not a good thing to say. Often. Now, some you're not going to win over. Some are going to be very staunch in what they believe, but at least you have some strategies and tools that not only apply to you as adults in the classroom, but also tools that students can use too. That 4-step process is just as viable for students that are encountering comments or statements that might be biased in nature. So those 4 steps I rely on very heavily. I do it in my own practice. I have to. If I had the time today during our session this morning, I would have wanted to know who that was and would have done the 4-step process with them, probably not as nicely.
We probably have time for one more question if it's out there.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I'm a
ahead,
school counselor at a couple different levels. And one of my questions is, you know, as an employee who has supervisors who might not be in the same space as me, I'm struggling, and I know other teachers are struggling with feeling like we're not really getting the permission to have these conversations. And I'm not even sure if permission is needed. I don't know if that, you know, would, if anybody would get in trouble for having them, but there hasn't really been a whole lot allowing teachers to feel comfortable. And I don't know how to push that, because I feel comfortable, and I know a lot of teachers are in that space too. But it's just a tricky situation, and I wasn't sure if you had any insight on that.
It is a very tricky situation. I'm sorry if there's feedback. But it is a very tricky situation because not only are your administrators trying to navigate the space, process it too, but they may have pressures from community, from school board, from all of these other components that might be impacting how comfortable they are allowing for it to be said and done. And so I think Susan said it well. In your classrooms, it becomes your space. And if students are talking about it, I would just encourage you, and this is Nikole personal speaking, I would encourage you to be bold and go forth. It would be, to me, a disservice if you don't have the conversation, if you allow the conversation to be guided in a different way, because kids are going to talk whether we want them to or not. So I think to actually have that guidance is really important. I know that there are administrators that are really in a catch-22. There are even some who feel very bold and strong on the opposite end of what a lot of us may be feeling coming into today. And so that creates another dynamic of how do you maneuver through some of those things. And so I think it's just being, and again, the book is a great resource, talking about how to know when to not share your opinion directly as that adult in the room and just allow the facilitation of the conversation to allow you to just guide it so that it continues to be safe for the diversity in opinion and voice. So that's all I can really offer, because again, each of these districts are very contextual. You're dealing with differences, with thoughts, with political affiliations. So it's just finding the space where students know that they can come to you. I think that's the main thing.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question.
Great questions this afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Dr. Nikole Hollin-Sims. If there's anything that she's taught me through the number of calls that we've had, you know, equity is a big journey, huge journey, and it looks very different in different districts. So, you know, try not to tackle everything at once. You can't do that. So Dr. Nikole Hollin-Sims is very open to working with anyone. So if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to her, myself, Jim. And we want to thank you for your work. So
thank you all very much for attending this afternoon.
Thank
yes,
you.
we will send out the recording and the resources in a follow-up email tomorrow. Have a great afternoon or evening,
Have a great
everyone.
day. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.